Hello all, welcome to Mysterious Knowledge Texts, the Illuminati formula used to create an undetectable mind control slave part 3. Please like and subscribe. The primary important factor for the trauma-based mind control is the ability to disassociate. It was discovered that this ability is passed genetically from generation to generation. American Indian tribes, who had traumatic ritual dances and who would wait motionless for hours when hunting, children of fakirs in India, who would sleep on a bed of nails or walk on hot coals, children of yogis, those skilled in yoga, who would have total control over their body in trance. Tibetan Buddhists, children of Bodhan, Bizango and other groups have a good ability to disassociate. The children of multigenerational abuse are also good at dissociation. The Illuminati families and European occultists went to India and Tibet to study occultism and Eastern philosophy. These Europeans learned yoga, tantric yoga, meditations, and trances and other methods to disassociate. These skills are passed on to their children via genetics. A test is run when the children are about 18 months old to determine if they can dissociate enough to be selected for programming or not. Mind-controlled slaves are created for different purposes, hierarchy or non-hierarchy purposes. The Illuminati create mind-controlled slaves who are to function within the Illuminati hierarchy. These slaves will usually have their genealogies hidden, and will be created to have excellent cover lives to ensure that they are not detected. They will be given multifunctional programming, and will usually be used to help program other slaves. The abuse will not be as physically visible as it will be on the bodies of slaves who are not born to be part of the Illuminati elite. Members of Mariah equals the Illuminati, Luciferian elite will have undergone as much trauma as other slaves, however the torture scars and the control are better concealed. These children will often receive lavish experiences as well as talks to convince them that they are part of the elite. By the way, body scars will show up better under black light, that is the same black light as used in clubs. The Illuminati and other organizations have also programmed individuals who are simply expendable. These are sex slaves who are used up and killed very early in life, one-time use saboteurs, breeders, soldiers, drug couriers, and so forth. The bodies of these people will often show visible torture scars. The expendable are the children of parents who were blackmailed into turning their children over to the CIA. This is all hidden by the power of the National Security Act. These are children who have been sold by pedophile fathers or pornographic parents. The programmers/masters program them with the expectation that they will be thrown from the freedom train when they get to age 30. Freedom train is the code word for the monarch trauma-based mind control. To be thrown from the freedom train means to be killed. The CIA and the Illuminati are skilled at blackmailing parents to give up their children. They would watch the mail for porn. Pedophile and murderers who abuse their children are warned that they will go to prison for long lengths of time if they do not cooperate by selling their children into mind-controlled slavery. In return for the parents' cooperation, they provide rich financial rewards to the parents. It's clearly a case of if you don't cooperate you lose in life big time, if you do cooperate you win big time. Ministers are often set up with betas, a sexual model, who then blackmail them. The ministers do not want to lose their status and profession via scandals, so they agree to turn their children over when young to the CIA to work with. The Illuminati like to blackmail these ministers when they are finished with their seminary schooling and committed to the ministry at about 33 years of age. The idea of having nothing to fall back on after they have committed their entire life to one profession is too much for these weak-willed men, and they buckle under the threats. If they don't buckle under, the resulting consequences will remove them from ministry. The type of father who is most preferred by the programmers to offer up their children for programming is the pedophile. If a father will abuse his own little baby girl, then the programmers know that the man has no conscience. This father's involvement in criminal activity, and thereby his vulnerability, can be continually increased. They want men who they believe will not develop any qualms later on in life about what they have done. A man who waits until his daughter is a teenager to molest her, is usually esteemed to have too much conscience for the programmers. A big distinction must be made between hierarchy monarch slaves, and non-hierarchy monarch slaves. The reason there is such a big distinction is that they are not programmed the same way. Since this book is giving the recipe for how to create a monarch slave, we will have to cover the distinction between slaves within the Illuminati and those slaves who function outside of the Illuminati hierarchy. It is important to stress that the label monarch is used in this book in a generic sense for the modern trauma-based total mind control that is taking place. Whether an Illuminati mind-controlled slave is technically in the monarch records or out of the actual monarch program data files kept on computer is merely a technicality. In my, Fritz's, other writings, I explain about how the Illuminati created the CIA. I know that some of its directors were members of the Illuminati, and I strongly suspect that the other CIA directors were probably full-fledged members too. The two organizations need each other. If the CIA didn't have the international backing of the movers and shakers of the world, it would have been exposed and done away with. Likewise, the Illuminati, because it is so secret, needs organizations through which it can work. The CIA is a front for the Illuminati, and the CIA in turn sets up fronts. Some of those fronts are elaborate, well-staffed, well-equipped programming sites, such as many of the state mental hospitals, McGill Psychiatric Training Network consisting of 8 Montreal hospitals, ESP, St. Mary's, NASA in Huntsville, AL, the Presidio, CA, and Knott's at China Lake, CA, to name a few. For a more complete list, see Appendix B. The Illuminati couldn't do it alone without its fronts. Satanists within the network and the CIA took over Boys Town, NE in the early 1950s, and used that famous orphanage for a constant supply of boys for programming. Boys Town is perhaps the most famous, but there are a whole long list of others. When the Monarch programming started, the top men were Illuminati. Originally, Joseph Menschel was the lead programmer. He had already achieved the rank of Grand Master, later Ipsimus, within the Illuminati. He had become skilled in music, in Kabbalistic magic, in dancing, in abortions, and in torture. By the way, Menschel had a sadistic mother, and programming children. Many of the concentration camp children that Menschel programmed still survive and still love him to this day as daddy. Menschel disappeared from Auschwitz in Jan. 1945, several months before the final chaos began in the Third Reich. He disappeared so the Illuminati could smuggle him to the US, so that his exceptional knowledge of programming honed and fine-tuned on thousands of concentration camp child victims could be put to use on a grande scale in the US. He traveled worldwide, but especially in western US, doing his programming accompanied by his pair of 2 black servants. American Monarch survivors remember his spotless German uniform, his shiny boots which he wore during programming, his thick German accent, his handsome features, his cleft chin, the space in his front teeth, the way he would jab with his thumb while programming, as if he were still saying links. Rex to lines of Jews coming into the concentration camps. The reason Menschel was so excited to do the selection process of inmates coming into Auschwitz was that he was choosing inmates for his numerous mind control trauma experiments. He was especially anxious to get identical twins, because his genetic research related to mind control needed persons of identical genetic makeup. Traditionally, the Illuminati had been having their children inspected by a woman with the rank of Grande Mother. She would determine the fitness of the children and then present them for a formal acceptance ceremony at age 3 to the Grande Druid Council. This procedure didn't change when Menschel came over. The programming just jumped from being an occult science to one that had full access to the medical, psychiatric, judicial, scientific and governmental sectors via the power of the National Security Act and the intelligence agencies. The Illuminati's programming of multiples prior to Menschel's arrival were simplistic, compared to the sophisticated techniques engineered by the Nazi Germans, whose mind control research included some non-German nationals such as some Italians. Just as a victim who is killed by an 18th century musket is just as much victimized as someone killed by an M16, so a victim of the pre-1946 programming was just as victimized as those programmed with more sophisticated techniques. For the Illuminati, the child's programming is planned by the Circle, another name for their organization, before it is born. From the Illuminati's perspective, their plans involve generational spirits and positions within the hierarchy. The child is conceived according to their rituals, and the steps that child will go through follows a well thought out detailed regimen for programming it. In contrast, the children from foster homes, or pedophiles do not receive the same regimen. Hierarchy slaves will in turn be used to program and train other hierarchy children, while CIA slaves and Mafia slaves and KKK slaves etc. will be discarded. This is why a presidential model is thrown from the Freedom Train, the name of the monarch program in the underworld. Women and men in the Illuminati will continue to help with the programming their entire lives. The Illuminati is programming such vast numbers of children, they need every one of their able members to help. Mariah's total membership worldwide numbers in the millions. The Illuminati regimen for their children is far more controlling than the CIA's programming. Not everyone in the Illuminati gets their mind split and becomes a programmed multiple. However, everyone does get some type of mind control. Those who have been spared multiplicity still must participate in a 2-week intense mind control session that might be compared to the Army's Ranger School. Those who participate in this have learned obedience. Those who haven't learned obedience are forced into ritual gladiator-type duels or other punishments to eliminate them. Finally, a traitor's death as pictured on one of the tarot cards is waiting. Sharon Tate was left hanging in the know. 12 tarot cards, hangman position from the house rafters. The best therapists will quietly admit that traditional therapy is inadequate. Unless God intervenes, people who are born into the Illuminati don't escape it while alive. This book isn't a mere exercise of academic thinking, but is written with the assurance that freedom is possible, there are viable answers. Some children live in foster homes, or with adopted parents, or in orphanages, or with caretakers and guardians. Because these children are at the mercy of the non-related adults, these types of children frequently are sold to become mind-controlled slaves of the intelligence agencies. In review, remember that because many of these organizations are controlled by the Illuminati, an Illuminati slave may often work for one of these front groups, while the Illuminati maintain control over the base program. The intelligence networks were started by and run by the Illuminati. They are Illuminati fronts. The use of slaves crosses many organizational boundaries within the overall network. If a slave is to be used as a Delta model, assassination, they may be selected for strength and dexterity. The Delta Force is the Army's elite unit made up of monarch slaves. If they are to operate as a Beta model, sexual slave, they will be chosen if they can master technique. Occasionally they might in some circumstances be selected for how pretty the programmers expect the child to become. Some parents have produced good-looking children and are actually sought after to bear children to sell into the mind-controlled slavery freedom train system. However, vastly more important for beta sex slaves are their ability to be programmed to have charm, seductive skills, charisma, and creativity. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the programmers can put almost any kind of body to use as a sex slave. Almost any sex slave can fit somewhere into the script of the Illuminati/New World Order/crime syndicate porn movies. I place porn in quotation marks because what they call porn doesn't resemble what the public thinks of porn. We're not talking Playboy type porn, we're talking ghastly horrible atrocities that are as sick as anything done in the Nazi concentration camps. For instance, it takes little acting ability or beauty to have one's head chopped off while having sex. There are different types of sexual slaves, but the Illuminati wants to get beta alters which are sharp, talented, skilled, and resourceful. They will use these beta alters, such as the Black Widow alters, for espionage and blackmail. To make sure that the child's mind develops properly, the baby will be interacted with so that those areas of the brain that are important to develop will develop to the maximum. It is a well-known fact that areas of the brain grow according to how much stimulation and use that area of the brain receives. For this reason, grande dames, who are involved in programming, will spend time drawing and showing faces to the child and seeing if the child can recognize identical faces. Almost any other item will be used. Candy canes with stripes, match the candy canes with the same no. Of stripes, trees, or pencils. The child must learn to match identical items very early, even before they can speak. This is so they will be able to build mirror images into their mind. All the senses are trained for building the mirror images, for instance such as silks and cottons can be used for the sense of touch. The child will have to match textures. The programmer, the grande dame, and grande mothers will teach the child to have good abilities in copying, reflecting, repeating, echoing, or re-echoing, and mirroring. They will be taught for hours how to re-echo something verbatim. Some of these teaching methods are almost like games. For instance, 20 pins will be in a box and the small child is given a short time to decide how many pins are in the box. A certain level of intelligence and creativity is needed for time to be wasted on programming. You cannot program a mind which is weak. Most of the people programmed are very intelligent. One study of multiples said that multiples were 130 or above in 1.0. And then mistakenly blamed their multiplicity on their 1.0. Attempts to program people with low intelligence or no creativity were discovered to be a waste of time. Methods are used to greatly enhance the victim's intelligence and creativity. The Illuminati will also work on enhancing their psychic abilities such as telepathy and clairvoyance. The head programmers have their own little mottos about building solid structures which they like to express to new trainees. These include, an unstructured house mind of the slave is like unto a house without walls, a house undisciplined is like unto a house without walls, it will crumble within itself, and a house divided against itself will not stand. Much of the structuring will be discussed in Chapter 7, but the structuring begins at birth for the victim, so this chapter will discuss the first steps. In order to build a solid good house, one needs to have a solid foundation. In order to build a solid foundation, one needs to know how the land lays and what the weaknesses of the land are, if it is sand or rock or clay, etc. One needs to design one's house to take advantage of the natural lay of the land. Will storms come from this or that direction? Where will the house need extra protection? The very same principles pertain to programming because a structure is being built. Many evil geniuses within the Illuminati added their contributions to the monarch programming. One of the most important was John Gittinger of Oklahoma, because he was the genius who could understand how a little child's mind was when it was in infancy. In order to work with something, you must know what you are working with. John Gittinger, who is no longer alive, worked at programming for years. His contribution was in the mental assessment area. John Gittinger, b. 1909, was the director of psychological services at the State Hospital in Norman, Oklahoma. He got a master's degree at age 30, and joined the CIA's MK Ultra Mind Control in 1950. He was a high school guidance counselor and a Navy lieutenant commander during W.W.2. In the late 1970s, he moved back to Oklahoma. He was heavy-set and goateed. It's been said he looked like the actor Walter Slezak. He had an insatiable curiosity about understanding human personality. When the Illuminati looked around for men skilled in personality assessment to assist the monarch programming, John W. Gittinger was one of their men who they selected. Gittinger was not the only researcher into personality that the CIA hired, but he was their top man in terms of the programming of children. From the end of WW2 until he began with the CIA in 1950, Gittinger was studying how to assess personality. At the Oklahoma State Hospital, he had large numbers of adults who could be studied. After Gittinger started doing personality assessment for the CIA, Most of his work became highly classified. The Rolling Stone article of July 18, 1974 asked why years of research into personality assessment should be so secret. In fact, it was so secret that Gittinger was not allowed to talk to journalists, even though it was public knowledge that Gittinger did personality assessment work/research. The reason that such an apparently benign science was kept secret is that it plays a major part in the success of the Monarch programming.